Welcome back to Podcast Recovery, everyone. We're your hosts, David O.
And Eric V.
Today, we're joined by our special guest, Eric. How are you doing, man?
I'm doing well, guys.
Good, man. So where are you from, Eric?
Originally Youngstown, Ohio, but I live in Atlanta for the last 10 years.
Nice. And when were you first introduced to recovery?
Let's see. I stopped drinking January 1st. I think I found a meeting that day. So, on January 1st, 2020, I just, I woke up in the shower and all right, I'll go to a meeting. So I went to a meeting late that night.
Nice. All right. So you've been clean for what, 15 months now? Going on 16 or 16?
15. Ooh.
Nice. Well, congratulations, man. And without further ado, we're going to turn it over to you to share your story with us. So take it away.
Yeah. I mean, drinking was, alcohol was my addiction of choice. So, I mean, going back, I think the first time I got drunk, I was at a party in high school. I was 15. So it was pretty early, to start drinking. And then,
Do you remember what your first drink was?
Peach schnapps.
Ooh.
That's a good one. That's a good first drink, though. I feel like
at least it wasn't 99, but
yeah, it's right up there with Mike's Hard, and it's a good starter to get you into
That's fair.
It's better than 99 bananas. I don't know how I ever did that.
That's true. That's true. 100%. All right, so you're at a party in high school drinking peach schnapps. Go.
Yeah, and then a couple months later, I went to another party and got drunk off of really girly drinks. And then, so that kind of started, where I drank a lot in high school. And then college came, and most people drink a good amount.
Mm-hmm.
And I was getting shit-faced every weekend. And that's when I got my DUI. I actually got 2 arrests back-to-back. And it should have technically been 2 DUIs, but the guy was nice to me. And he's like, if you start your car, I got to give you a DUI. Like, okay. So those were, that was 6 days apart. And I wasn't going to tell my mom about the first one because they just gave me a disorderly conduct. I'm like, she won't need to know. She doesn't need to know.
Yeah.
Well, I had to call her because I had nobody to drive the car from the impound lot. She pulls in, they released me under my own recognizance. And she's like, I'm not here for you. I'm here for the car. And as we're walking down the steps, my brother says, hey, did you know I got arrested last week? And I'm like, oh. So I drank a lot in college. And then grad school, I move away to Atlanta, but I drank more then because I was lonely. Grad school is different than undergrad because, I moved there and I didn't really know anybody outside of my uncle and his wife and kids. So, and in grad school, it's hard to meet people. So you just kind of, cope with alcohol. And
yeah,
it's a common theme with me that I don't have a physical dependence on alcohol. I never get the shakes. I don't crave a drink. What me and my therapist have come to call it is I had an emotional dependence. So the state of my life dictated a lot of, and my emotions dictated a lot of my drinking ability, because when things were going great, when I had met my fiance, I was great. It was happy. I'd have a beer, 2 beers, no more than that. Sometimes I didn't even finish the beer. It's but then when, I got hit by a car October 5th, 2017. Oof. And, quickly, my ex-fiance, she didn't know how to handle the situation that well. So she kind of just abandoned me, checked out, and, I was feeling unwanted, unloved. And with the TBI, I was getting more depressed. I just drank more. And the more she kind of pulled away, but didn't really say anything, it was you could buy that with the TBI. It was like stepping on the gas pedal. And I was I wouldn't drink till she got home from work. And then it was just all right, how many do I drink? And then I would hide the bottles underneath the sink or something. But because of the TBI, the short-term memory problems, I would always forget they were there. And when we would clean on weekends, she would find them. So I was like, I just gave up after that.
Mm-hmm.
And then eventually I mixed it with my Ambien at night because I have difficulty sleeping, just brain injury. But, it got to the point where I was hoping I didn't wake up. I drank it off. I'm like, with this, if I take enough Ambien, maybe I won't wake up because it was, like I said, emotional dependency. I was in a lot of pain, and alcohol, it's a friend when you don't got one. So,
Mm-hmm.
Feeling out there on an island, yeah, it definitely got worse. And then, when I took on a job as a consultant, and I have slow processing speed. I'm bad with deadlines. Like, I can't work in a deadline-driven profession anymore. I was an architect, and then I became a consultant. And not only did I have deadlines, but I was traveling everywhere. And then,
Mm-hmm.
because I already have a full-blown alcohol problem, like when I'm on the road, if you stay at a Homewood Suites happy hour 5 to 7, I would sit there and drink, and I would go back with like 6 beers because I knew I wasn't going to sleep at night because I was on the road.
Mm-hmm.
So, I would purposely book that hotel because I knew I had free drinks. I wouldn't have to go to the gas station to buy alcohol. So, I mean, yeah. So that kind of, and then at that job, it started in October 2019. So right when, the point where everything kind of collapsed upon itself and imploded, that 3 month span led up to it where it was just, I was under so much pressure, anxiety, depression, the weight of it all, and then drinking as much as I did, it just kind of like, it was like a vortex into a black hole. It just all sucked itself into it, and then it just kind of all went off at once.
Mm-hmm.
And so then 2 days before Christmas, the ex fiance broke up with me. So I went on an 8-day bender because she went to Nashville for a few days to see her family for Christmas. I didn't do anything. I saw my uncle and his wife and kids, and they're not exactly the most. They're kind of assholes, and so instead of kind of giving me some level of comfort that I just kind of broke up with the one person that I cared about most,
Mm-hmm.
they kind of just kind of mocked and ridiculed me, and it just made me want to drink even more. So then I went on an 8-day bender.
Mm-hmm.
And I had a $500 bottle of champagne that I got from my attorneys, which I was involved with a lawsuit when I got hit. So that they liked me that much that they did that, on the holidays. So I'm like, this is going to be the last thing I drink. I didn't share it with anybody. It was the last thing I drank. And when I woke up, I got in the shower and I just laid on the floor like, okay, we'll get sober now. So, and obviously 2020 was not an easy year for anybody. And, somehow I went through the entire year sober because, with COVID, we all got pretty isolated, and I had like no contact with anyone, from February 1st to October 5th, 2020. I didn't even, nobody even gave me a fist bump. It was like, man. So, but even though I was feeling like very lonely and so kind of depressed, it was different in a way. So, I did feel like I had that emotional dependency to get me through it. And I think that's why it wasn't as hard because, lonely is lonely, but abandoned is a different type of feeling,
Mm-hmm.
because you're searching for someone to, somebody to stick their hand out, grab my hand, I'll be there for you. Well, nobody was doing that. So
Yeah.
I'll find you. You find it somewhere.
Mm-hmm.
And I've managed to be sober ever since. I actually did my first triathlon sober because the nights before races and the day and night before races, I would always go to breweries, whatever town I was racing in,
Mm-hmm.
or we'd go to wineries. And, I would do that till I slept. And depending on how much I drank before, I would either be hungover or half in the bag. It varied depending on the activities the day before. So it was, 2 weeks ago was the first time I raced sober. It was different.
So you would do triathlons while like hungover?
Yeah. Well, all right. Depending on how cold the water is, once you hop in, if it's cold enough, you'll forget that your head hurts.
Yeah, that's true.
David, we've talked about this. Like a lot of people get fucked up and play sports.
Yeah,
Like-
I couldn't do it. I was so uncoordinated and shitty that it just never worked for me.
It's not a great place to start, but when I was in high school, I was a really good swimmer, and I was going out most of the weekends doing high school parties. So that's kind of when I got indoctrinated to like waking up feeling like shit, getting in the pool, and then within 15 minutes you feel better. But I mean, that time just gets shorter and shorter, and you just it's almost like state dependent learning, except for it's once you're accustomed to it, you could just do things by repetition. But I mean, there was an Ironman that I did, and I was on the bike, and I had drank like 3 bottles of wine the night before because I couldn't sleep. It was my first one, and I was nervous. So when I woke up and drove over to transition to set up my bike and go to the race start, I was still drunk. The swim took me an hour to go the 2.4 miles. I was still drunk. I'm like, I'm going to sober up halfway through a 5-hour bike ride. So this is going to suck.
Yeah.
And sure enough, that's how long it took. It's like, man, I need a drink. The hair of the dog. But I get a transition before I got out of the run. I'm like, that would be really nice if I had one right now. But you just get used to it. You'd be amazed what you can get used to.
Yeah.
So, yeah. But it was different. So.
All right. Well, we definitely have some questions for you. Eric, would you like to go first?
No, David, you can go first as always. It's okay. Just go ahead.
You're such a dick. All right. So what was your first meeting like and what fellowship did you decide to go with when you picked a meeting that day?
So I went to, it was an AA meeting down by at the Vinings Firehouse, and it was like 3.5 miles, and it was like, okay, I'll go there. And I'm very open. People ask, I'm comfortable answering anything people ask. At least I haven't said anything where I wouldn't yet, but I'll answer pretty much anything. And so when I'm in group settings, I'll talk. And, this one guy comes up to me at the end, and he's like, I noticed you didn't say you were an alcoholic when you talked. I'm like, this is my first time I was here. I don't really know how this works.
Yeah.
So that was my first experience. I'm like,
oh. Cool. All right, Eric.
All right. So I want to, you kind of mentioned something about, and I was thinking about this yesterday, is that we all kind of have this shared experience with COVID. And it's definitely, you're talking about the loneliness and the isolation of not having human contact, right? For months, like 6 months. What do you think, sorry, my dog is going crazy, but what do you think the effects are? Like you said, the depression and the loneliness, like how have you been able to improve upon that feeling since October? Like, and since this has all started, have you been able to kind of get some of that back?
Well, first off, the isolation's a lot like when they throw you in the hole in prison. Yeah, I've got some more square footage than that, but when you're alone, you're alone. Because remember, like, we shut down middle of March. I had in December, I had just went through a breakup. I moved out officially February 1st. So I went with living someone to living with no one. I've got my 2 cats that I've had for the last 13 years, but you develop all the same symptoms that you would being thrown in the hole. The isolation, it leads to self doubt, a little bit, a degree of paranoia, and it causes anxiety. And I remember the first part of your question. What was the second half?
Just how, now that's like another thing you're talking about, like breaking up and like you've been living with someone and now you're in this place where you're isolated and that causes the anxiety and the depression. How are you learning to cope with changing it a little bit? How are you learning to cope with being alone? Right? Because that is what COVID has kind of forced a lot of us to do. Like the isolation, how are you able to separate from letting yourself go down that hole of being like, yeah, no one does like me. Like I am all by myself. Like, how do you defeat that?
That's kind of where I started my YouTube channel. And first I started off doing video logs about, brain injury related stuff. It wasn't so much telling my story chronologically. It was taking bits and pieces and, summing it up into some kind of take home lesson with it. There's a point to the story I told and it's not very long. So it's not the life story of it. Mm-hmm. But I started doing that. And then, because with YouTube, you have to put out content on a regular basis. Well, I couldn't do that with just a video log. So to feed the algorithm, I'm like, all right, I'll start interviewing, triathlon figures, whether you swim, you bike, you run, and people that are somehow related to brain injuries. There was a ringside fight doc. There was a professional boxer. I had, the NFL quarterback, Jim McMahon. So I did that. And even though that is not my most viewed material, it was what helped get me through, a lot of that pandemic until we kind of, I started running with some people again. And, it gave me social interaction. There was no contact. I'm talking to people that I don't even know, and I'm asking them a bunch of stuff about what they do. And I just dig up interesting people. It helped me get through that. And it was, it also sucked because in that breakup, I lost a lot of friends. We were all mutual friends. They lived by her. So they kind of picked her side. And, I lost a whole lot of friends going into COVID. So like, yeah, that was like, I've never felt more alone than I did for 7 months,
Yeah. All right. All right. So your first meeting was in an in-person meeting, and did where you are, did meetings like get shut down as well? Did you have to move to like virtual meetings?
Yeah. That started the middle of February.
Okay.
But that's when I stopped going to AA.
Okay.
2 weeks before that, like at the end of January, I had a meeting, and I asked this, maybe it was 3 weeks. Don't ask me on dates; it's a little fuzzy. Anyway, the one guy that I connected with, which by some twist of fate, I actually knew his boyfriend. I had coached swimming with him, so we were somehow interconnected, and we met through alcoholism. Right? He was cool. I'm like, will you be my sponsor? So we start going through the 12 steps, and it took me like 3 weeks to get to the first 2.
Mm-hmm.
And then, me and the sponsor, we still met even though COVID was going on. We did for a while. And I couldn't wrap my head around, I don't remember verbatim what it says, but it's kind of like surrendering yourself to God's will, that only He can guide you through this. And I'm not a religious person, but in my heart and in my head, I don't believe that statement to be true. Now
Mm-hmm.
you're gonna have. I'm trying to piece together how I'm going to say this in my head, and good chance it'll come out wrong. Like the Tommy Boy joke. Wait, it's got to be your bull. Sticks his head up his ass.
Yeah.
That's how it's probably going to come out. So, all right. I don't know if this is true of all drug addicts, but alcoholics don't accept blame for the things that they did, or the things that they probably did, or they don't remember doing. They don't accept the blame. Period. Right now, by that's by not accepting blame, you're not accepting accountability, right?
Mm-hmm.
So when I look at the step number 3, I was like, this is just a cousin of blame and not accepting accountability. By saying I can only get through this because of God, in my way is like saying, "Oh, relieve me of this burden. I can't control it myself." But at that point in my life, I'm like, you know what? I'm not drinking. I'm flying the plane. I'm in control. I don't have to surrender it to a higher power.
Mm-hmm.
All decisions come down to me. This is not
Yeah.
somebody is moving my hand fate. So I couldn't wrap my brain around that. So I didn't continue to go through it. But that was just my personal philosophy that
Yeah.
it's not in God's hands. It's in my hands now. I'm doing
Mm.
well. I got to just keep doing what I'm doing.
Mm-hmm.
I made the decision to stop. So, it's just kind of being accountable towards yourself, since you couldn't be accountable to yourself or other people before. So it just feels like they're related, like cousins.
Nice. Love that. All right, Eric, what do you got? I'm sure you're gonna dive more into that.
No, actually, I want to ask more about the TBI.
Oh, okay.
So you said you got hit by a car. Was and that wasn't the way you got the TBI, was it?
Yeah, it was.
That was the way. Okay.
Yep.
How? What are some of the things that you have to do on a daily basis that maybe myself or David wouldn't really have to think twice about? Like, what are some of the daily struggles that you have to overcome because of the TBI?
Do you use tiles? Do you know what a tile is?
I do know what a tile is. I do not use tiles, though.
What's a tile?
Okay. It says you put up. Well, they have a lot of applications now, but it started off this little key fob, right? That had a button on it. You could press, and it would locate your phone. Or if you were using your phone, it could locate your keys.
Mm-hmm.
And then they have stickers, and then they have all that stuff. I've got like 5 different tiles. One on my passport, one on my keys, one on my AirPods. What's the other one? One in my wallet, and I have to use it frequently because I forget where I set stuff. And I've got a jar or a bowl or some shit, and it's on my end table over here that I'm supposed to put my stuff in when I walk in the door.
Mm-hmm.
I don't always do that, and then I lose track of it. Even in an 1,100 square foot, condo that's cleanish, I still lose it. It's like if I didn't have those, I would be late for a lot of things because it's like, shit, I lost my keys. And it's like, nope, can't find my wallet. So I have to do that a lot because my short-term memory is pretty much shot. For the most part, all the things that I'm deficient with, I've learned to adapt for or come up with some solution. I use my Alexa for as much as I can. I hook up calendars, do reminders, stuff like that. I set my alarm clocks on it. I depend on it for everything. But, it's always telling me, you have a podcast in 10 minutes. Tomorrow you have a doctor's appointment, because I wouldn't always see the message go across my phone. So, I rely on Alexa a lot now to where I could usually just handle that on my own by looking at my calendar and stuff like that. But I have to have that. But stuff like driving, because my vision field is narrower, got a blind spot in my right eye, stuff like that, to where I didn't have depth perception. When you're not supposed to drive for a while, but after you've been driving like 4 months, you get accustomed to it, even though it hasn't improved at all, and you just deal with it. But yeah, I can't be as aggressive and going in and out of traffic like I used to because my depth perception is skewed on the distance between your back bumper and my front bumper. I don't want to clip you, so yeah, I don't zig and zag anymore.
All right. So after stopping going to AA, did you turn to another like recovery support outlet, or like were you still talking to people? Were you like how were you getting information or help in the recovery field?
You know what the thing is, I kept in contact. I still talk to the guy I asked to sponsor me. We talk every 2 or 3 weeks. Usually it spurts, but he's not particularly good at remembering to check voicemails. Irony there. But yeah, other than that, I kind of just stopped, and it was like, okay, well, part of so, man, I just lost it. I hate when that happens. That's the other thing. Well, other than not being able to multitask and organize thoughts in my head, I'll lose spots where I was going with it. It was 2 things. Ugh. Oh, so I had resigned from the job that was having me working like 7 days a week, 80 hours out, on a guy who can't handle that, with a brain injury. So once I quit that, and once the X was out of the picture, with the X's, it's a Malcolm X quote, if you're not part of the solution, you're part of the problem. So once I got rid of the 2 biggest stressors and things that caused me anxiety and depression, once I was kind of liberated from those things, it got a lot easier to not want to lean on alcohol to get me through it. It's like my life had got exponentially better just by, getting away from those, I guess you could call them triggers. So it got easier from there.
All right. All right, Eric, I'm going to ask a second question.
Go right ahead.
Wait. This is an add-on, or this is a 2-parter?
It's sort of an add-on.
All right.
Okay. So, how am I going to word this? So Eric and I are not particularly spiritual people either, and Eric turned to smart recovery, which is more of like a science-based. So have you thought about that at all? And like the second part to that is, how important do you think it is that people sort of personalize their own recovery and maybe not necessarily follow a standard model that is built for the masses and not for the individual?
Well, everybody's different. It's kind of like teaching a 5th grader, right? Bobby learns differently than Susie. Bobby's more visual, and Susie's more analytic. And Bobby likes to draw. All right, so it's not a cookie cutter thing. It doesn't work for everybody.
Absolutely.
And sometimes it's no one thing. There's no wrong answer. If you want to pick and choose parts of different things and make it into what you need, I agreed with roughly half of the steps in AA. The first 2, and then I forget what was it, like 6 or 7. It's like where you make amends with other people. I felt that was important too. That's part of the accountability thing. The rest of the stuff, I didn't hold the same viewpoint as that, so I didn't take that. And the thing is, once I got again, once those two big triggers were removed from my life, it got easier. And then, I was like, all right, I'm doing good. I guess just keep doing what I'm doing, and we'll see how this works out.
Yeah, totally. All right, perfect. Great answer.
All right. I think I'm about tapped, David.
You're about tapped?
Yeah.
All right. I'm going to go ahead and ask your question, Eric, which I'm surprised you didn't ask. So what does recovery mean to you?
A lot of things, but it's kind of gain a sense of sanity back. But it's you flying the plane, you having control. Rather, I'm going to say necessarily powerless to alcohol or whatever your addiction is. But, you can't have one without the other. So once you learn that, it's like, oh, I can survive without this. I can make it through my day and be okay at the end, And once you can get past that, you'll be okay.
All right. And I want to give you a minute because I think I'm about out of. Let me see if I have any more questions. No, I think I'm about tapped as well. So I'm going to give you a quick minute or two to talk to anybody out there, any of our listeners who are struggling. What do you have to say to them?
I'm going to go in an opposite direction that you would expect here. You never quit addictions. You never do. The way I've always viewed addiction is you trade. Once you find that, and once you can quit that, it takes about 6 months, but you'll find something that's a new addiction. It may be healthier, you may be more obsessive about it, but you just trade addictions. Like I was smoking and dipping, and I managed to quit, and I found triathlon, within 6 months. And then I was hooked on that. And you become addicted to the trading, the racing. And, I quit drinking. And I haven't, I guess, like the running the YouTube and, being so open and public about it, that just became the new addiction. But you never quit. You only trade.
No, I actually, there's a lot of validity to that, and I think Eric would agree with me as well. Like, especially in like fellowship circles, once you give up the drugs or the alcohol, usually, like cigarette smoking goes up, either energy drinks or coffee consumption, or sugary or salty food consumption goes up. So you have a very good point. Like a lot of those addictions just get traded, and sometimes it's healthier, and sometimes it's a lateral move from doing cocaine to drinking 50 ounces of Red Bull a day. Like you're probably doing the same amount of damage to your heart and stomach. I think there's a lot of validity to that. All right. Well, we would like to thank our guest Eric for joining us.
Thank you.
All right, Eric, we take a minute and let our listeners know where they can find you on YouTube and Instagram and all that.
Yeah, everything is Espo Swim Bike Run, ESPO Swim Bike Run. I mean, I got a website. I do a lot of writing. That's another thing I forgot to say. Writing helped me get through a lot of all my, my bullshit. Like I got very good over the last year and a half, and it helps to look back on it and say, this is where I was. But another interesting thing that I do that was more related to the brain injury than the alcoholism, but I guess you could apply it to all forms of recovery, whether, whatever your addiction is or injury. I use this website called futureme.org, It's free. You could send a bunch of these emails, and then they ask you to donate a couple of bucks. But what you could do is you can write a letter to your future self. And, you could 1 year, 5 years from now, arbitrary date, whatever you want. And when I would write them, I'm going to really struggle getting this verb tense and everything right. So when you would write in the future, you would talk as if it's the present, right? And when you write about it, this is what you would hope, because you should always have hope and optimism in recovery. This is what you would hope to see, 7 months, 3 days from now or whatever, 6 months, whatever your date is. This is where you would like to be, And then when you speak of the past, you don't, crush it with negativity. You kind of shine a light on it, but treat it as like, this is where I was, this is where I am today. And if you write what you envision your life to be like, however many, months or days down the road, a lot of the time you can reach exactly what it says. And, the last thing about those letters is, because you usually forget that you wrote them or what was in them or where they were getting there, it's a surprise. And it's a nice surprise to see an email from yourself telling about, man, is the future everything you said it was going to be? And you look at the past, it's like, wow, look how far I've come in 5 months. So that was a unique thing. And I'm pretty sure that could be applied to any recovery. So their website is futureme.org.
That's pretty cool.
Yeah.
I like that.
That's really cool. Especially Eric with his 5-year plans and all his ridiculous anal retentive things about life.
It's important to be prepared, David.
All right. Okay. That's fair. All right. Well, here at Podcast Recovery, we are aiming to expand the scope of support for recovering addicts. Accessibility and convenience of helpful services is paramount to combating addiction. We work to bring the message of recovery to every addict wherever and whenever it is needed. We believe that a powerful voice of recovery should be obtainable, practical, and a touch of a button. Every addict deserves to hear a message of hope, and Podcast Recovery is here to provide it. All right, everybody. Thanks for joining us. Eric, you were a great guest. We appreciate having you on. And most importantly, everybody out there, stay safe and stay clean.